So welcome to the first quarantine edition of the Mind Wanderers podcast. If you don't know why we're in quarantine, please check the news. I'm pretty sure it will let you know why. Before I start this episode, I would just like to say a massive big thank you to all the people out there who are still doing their jobs and helping society through this pandemic. Just like to say a big thank you. For those of you who don't know, you can take part. There's a clap at 8 o'clock every Thursday for our NHS just to show our appreciation. I know they really do appreciate it. I have a cousin who works in the NHS, and right now a lot of them are stressed and a lot of them are overworked, and I've know some people who actually work in the NHS, and it is quite a tough time. So even just a clap at 8 o'clock, just the sentiment alone is a lot for the people who are out there fighting for us during this war against coronavirus. There was a really nice tweet I saw a couple weeks back that I retweeted because I felt it was really it really showed how I feel at the moment. And what it basically said is, so society's real key workers have just been revealed. Not the bankers, not the traders, not the elite hedge fund managers. It's the nurses, the doctors, the delivery drivers, the carers, the porters, the teachers, the shelf stackers, and the checkout staff. And that really struck deep with me, and I feel like this is the time for us to show our appreciation to the people who are really the core function of our society. And on that note, let's get to the show. Mickety Mike, Mickety Mike, Mickety Mike. You are now tuned in to the Mind Wanderers podcast, the podcast where we wander and explore the world around us. I'm your corona-free host, Timi, and this is episode 11. Thank you for joining me for episode 11 of the Mind Wanderers podcast. Really appreciate anyone who has tuned in. I guess none of us really have anything better to do other than listen to stuff on the internet or listen to a new podcast you guys are listening to. How is everyone actually coping with the lockdown? Is everyone making sure they get their regular runs in? Are you doing more than one run? Have you seen the shops lately? I went to Tesco recently, and due to the new social distancing measures in place, we now have to stand 6 feet away from each other, as I'm sure you all know. But now that means that lines are even longer. And I went to Tesco the other day, and the way they've now set it up is such that it's kind of like a club, like 15 people leave and then one single person's allowed inside, and basically that makes your trip to whatever shop a whole lot longer. So I think that's going to actually stop people buying a ridiculous amount of food, even though I did read quite recently that panic buying has stopped. So thank God for that. But yeah, for any of you new listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. This is a Mind Wanderers podcast, the podcast where I take random thoughts, topics, ideas, and literally just have a wonder about them. And hopefully you guys learn something new and just have a think outside your regular day to day. So with that being said, I did think this was a good period now that everyone is at home for people to actually know their family, if that makes sense. A lot of the time we say we know our family, we say we maybe know what their favorite foods are or what their favorite things to do are, but do you actually really know? And I heard on one of the podcasts I listened to, which is called Brilliant Idiots, hosted by Charlemagne the God and Andrew Schultz, and Charlemagne was basically describing a game his daughter made up, which was a family bonding game, which is you have several different cards which just have like the general trivia questions about each family member, and you basically play that with your family and you get to learn a lot more. And I thought that was really cool. My parents and my mum said this is the first time ever that everyone in the family has been together for so long. Because if you think about it, we're always out and about, so the actual time we spend together most of the time is like a week or two on a holiday. So this extended period is, for some families, the first ever time that they've spent so much time with each other. So instead of seeing this as a lockdown, maybe a silver lining. I'm part of the Silver Linings Club, SLC. All you other Silver Lining Club members, please tune in. But if you want to look at the silver linings in regards to this particular situation we're in, you can see it as this is a time for you to bond with your family and find out more about what they're doing, what they're thinking about, how they're feeling, and just it's another form of actually keeping us together and essentially sticking together through this really tough time. But I do understand not everyone is actually with their family at the moment, and some people are actually living by themselves, meaning that they have to call family over the phone or have FaceTime conversations. So for a lot of you guys, I believe it is also a time to reflect and also have your thoughts to yourself. And a lot of this podcast is letting your thoughts wander off and somewhat learning from what you wander to. So with that being said, I did think it's really interesting whenever big things in history happen. Don't you have like a pre-World War II and a post-World War II, and you have a before Christ and a after Christ, and it's normally indicated through history that this was a significant event and there was a life before this and there's a life after this significant event. And my mind just started to wonder as to what questions I have as to how after coronavirus was going to be. I did want to call it post coronavirus, but when you shorten that to PC, if I believe PC has already been taken, so I don't want it to be misconstrued. So I've got I think a really cool exercise, I think, for all you mind wanderers out there, is to just think of all the things possible for after coronavirus. So I would love to find out some of you guys like AC questions. I have a couple myself that I thought I would actually share with you guys. So one of them was, after coronavirus, do you believe that we're now going to have a new tabletop formation? So now at restaurants it's a case of you have salt, pepper, maybe vinegar, and maybe a couple other condiments or whatnot. Do you think after coronavirus now we're going to have salt, pepper, antibacterial, vinegar? I definitely think straight after, a lot of people are going to request that be something just as standard everywhere, just to make sure that we're being as safe as possible after we get over the peak of this virus. So that's just one question. Another after corona question I had was, how long till everyone becomes comfortable going to concerts and gigs and festivals? Because I was having a discussion with my brother and we were just kind of happy that we had gone to some concerts fairly recently before the lockdowns and before all of this really started kicking off. And we went to go see Schoolboy Q and J-Rock. I believe we went to go see another artist called Maxo Cream, really dope artist, so definitely check out Maxo Cream. And we saw a couple other people, Gold Link, and so we've been to quite a few concerts recently. But after coronavirus, how open our councils, our cities going to be to having mass amount of people in one particular arena / venue? Obviously we can't shut down everything for indefinitely, but how is the transition from this pure shock to our system going to be when we now are given the option of being able to go back to these massive venues where a lot of people, because if you have been to some festivals and to some concerts before, you will realize there's nothing social distancing or any social distancing that is possible in some of those spaces. So how are we going to deal with that going forward? And how is that going to affect musicians going forward? A lot of upcoming musicians have really small venues, really intimate venues, and how are they going to deal with the transition from maybe not being able to hold their gigs or maybe hold their tour dates? So a lot of people are going to have to transition to the internet. I was also thinking, are we now going to have a lot more virtual concerts, maybe using some VR technology? This is something that is available and has been experimented with before, so who knows where we're going to go with that. also, one of the questions I had for like my AC questions, or like for the AC questions are, do you think the world will now treat all these key workers, so people such as the NHS workers, the people, delivery drivers, people who work in the stores, are they going to become the new society celebrities? Because obviously the superstars are the entertainment stars at the moment. And however, will our appreciation for those key workers will it increase over time? And also, who are we actually going to stick to that? Because humans are very, very forgetful beings. So we can be, oh, we love the NHS now and we thank God for everyone who's stacking our shelves, but the minute they tell us that, okay, back to usual, or at least back to some form of normalcy, will we go back to thinking that those people are as trivial as we used to believe? But now everyone's starting to really get clued into how integral these people are to our society. So that was another like AC question I had. If you do have any AC questions, you can let me know and I will share some on the podcast. I feel like this is going to be an episode thing now, just how you feel things are. You might even be questions you had about things we did in the past and how we won't be able to do them anymore. It might be to how things might change in the future. It might be a conspiracy theory, but send through your AC questions. If you have Twitter, you can reach the podcast at mind_wanderers, so you can shoot me a DM there. If you are on Instagram, it is at mindwanderers_podcast. And if you're someone who does not use social media and want to send through an AC question, you can send it through to the email, which is mindwandererspod@gmail.com. So that's mindwandererspod@gmail.com. The last AC question I actually had, which was a really, really good one, and I think a lot of people should think about, is, do you think the world will come together as a result of this pandemic, or will people retreat within themselves? As we've seen, a lot of people have now stopped their holidays and are returning back home. Some people are pleading with their government to make sure that they're repatriated back home. I believe the UK still have some people out in Peru. The US have God knows how many people out there. And loads of countries are basically organizing themselves to make sure that they get their citizens back home, because everyone always feels safer back home. And my question is, the world is now moving in such a way that we can see most countries are actually dealing with the crisis in their own way. It does make sense, as we have different populations, we have different medical situations. However, as a result, I think it's quite clear to see that a global response to the situation would be better. We haven't seen it as of yet. So my big after corona question is, will we as a society, the global society, because yes, we are a global society, will we stop being as global as possible, and will we now retreat within ourselves and become more isolationist countries where we're doing a lot of things for ourselves? Because a lot of countries are now starting to see how dependent and reliant they are on China, and for China to produce things. So with that being blown up effectively, and everyone seeing the weakness within their system when it's heavily reliant on another country, will countries now reformat the way they think about manufacturing? So will manufacturing now become a bigger industry for a lot of countries going forward? So these are all the questions that I'm starting to think about. And I think in this spare time where we have all these thoughts going through our head and where we have time to actually think, so send through your AC questions and I will read it out on the show. And yeah, let's just continue thinking. I think it's a really good exercise, and it really allows your mind to wander and think about the whole range of things that are going on in the world. And that's what the whole podcast is about, is just being able to think outside our media and possibly learn something. So with that to the side, has anyone felt like Brexit was years ago, or the last time they went to a restaurant was like decades ago? And obviously I'm exaggerating, but has their perception of time meant that they now feel like, even now as I speak, you don't really know what day it is. It's more a case of, I know there was a day yesterday, I know there's going to be a day tomorrow, and I know I'm currently in one day. And even dates and time is just a bit of a blur at the moment as we're all stuck at home. And this led me to the topic that I want to deal with today, which is basically on time. The name of this episode is Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. And that was just a tweet I saw. And what the female was trying to show was just how, when you're cooped up in one place, our perception of time is really warped. And I thought this was a really interesting topic because we've all heard of the phrase time flies when you're having fun, and we've all seen those shows where the clock will be dragging when a character is being really bored, and when it's just basically showing that when you're not having fun, time goes really slowly. And I thought this was a really cool topic to maybe go into. So today I feel like dealing with time and looking at how we perceive time and why we perceive time the way we do, especially in this isolation sort of period we are, and when everyone is feeling like days are just going by. It'll be really interesting to analyze and just have a wonder with how humans perceive time, why we perceive time the way we do. A question I was thinking about: do animals perceive time the same way we do? Do animals remember stuff like birthdays? Are they capable of doing that? So I felt like perception of time was what I really wanted to have a wonder about today. So after the break, I'm going to delve a little bit into that.
It was all good just a week ago. Last week I had everything. Had it all good just a week ago. I had the money.
I don't know why the song It Was All Good Just a Week Ago came to my head, but once all of this started happening within the world, that was one of the biggest thoughts. It was first started off as a joke, but then I really started to think about it, and it was all good just a week ago sounds very apt for what we're going through now, and also with this theme of perception of time. When I've looked into the topic of time and having a wonder about it, I then started to find out a lot more in regards to how time is actually the product of human evolution. And if you recall me saying just before the break, I was wondering whether animals have a different perception of time to that we do. And looking into it, time is, as we know, it's not something you can touch, it's not something you can smell, it's not something you can necessarily see, but it's something that you can experience. And time itself is humans just registering a sequence of events or a passage of time rather than an actual thing that we can refer to as time. And as far as we know, we're the only animals on planet Earth that have this innate sense and deep feeling in regards to time. We're the only animals that would understand that it has been 20 years since you've seen someone. We're the only animals that can register that it's only been 5 seconds since you've just seen someone. And so I had a little look into how the differences between humans and animals when it comes to time, and I saw some really good analysis and research into how dogs associate certain feelings with an event rather than they know what time of the day it is. In the case of when their owner comes home, they can't necessarily distinguish between times, but the feeling that they have will still be the same if they're presenting with the same stimulus. So rather than it be a case of I haven't seen my owner for 20 days or 2 days, the feeling will still be the same because they've attributed a certain emotion to seeing their owner. So why it might seem that the dog is even happier that they're seeing their owner, be it after a long time, is actually human perception that is attributing a sense of a longness that the animal is feeling. The animals don't necessarily take into consideration whether it's been 2, 5 or 20 days. They just kind of go with the flow, and if they get a certain feeling from seeing someone initially, be it the owner gives them a treat when they get in, and so the dog has now associated anytime the owner comes home, they're going to get a treat, therefore they're happy. It's rather than animal understanding the passage of time, what they're doing is reacting to a stimulus that they've become accustomed to. And going a bit further, I then started to wonder, so let's forget the case of dogs, let's start moving on to other animals as well. And this then led me to the topic of threat perception. And threat perception is essentially when something new is coming towards you, you don't necessarily, your brain is now hit with so much new information that it enters this sort of primal mode in which it slows down time. So in order for you to have an extra second or two in order to react, and this then follows through that small animals such as rats or smaller animals such as that are typically prey, let's say rats, mice, they tend to experience life a lot slower compared to humans. And the reason why this is down to the fact that when a rat is running around, it has to be very aware of potential predators. It has to be aware if a cat is around the corner. So what its brain is able to do after years of evolution is to pick up signals that it's receiving through its eyes a lot quicker and interpret those signals a lot quicker than, let's say, a human. So in this sense, you then can understand that when, let's say, a fly is flying around the room, it's experiencing the world in a much slower rate compared to humans because it's receiving a lot more information compared to a human at the time, and its brain is able to take in that amount of information and then respond to it, because animals such as, or insects and animals, small insects and animals need this ability in order to make sure that they're not caught off hand by us trying to slap the fly or the cat trying to catch the mice or the mouse. So this trick is actually used in film quite a lot. Sometimes when they're showing a car chase or let's say a plane flying overhead, what they do is that they increase the field of vision that the viewer can see, and this allows things to seem as though they're zooming past, and when things are zooming past, of course it seems like you're going quicker. And similar in the flip sense is when you restrict the field of vision, you can actually see that things are perceived to be slower. There's a very cool video on YouTube by a Japanese professor that I watched that demonstrates how this whole time perception thing works. And what he does was he placed a camera on a train, and at different points in the video he either shows more of the video or restricts the line of vision within the video. And what you'll start to notice is that the way your brain will perceive how fast the train is going will be very dependent on how much information or how much you can see, i.e. So check that out. It's called Differences in Perceived Speed, and I think that would be very cool to highlight or demonstrate what I was referring to before. So going back to us in isolation, everyone is in lockdown. Every now and again I forget. Like there was a period where I woke up, I was thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to get ready for work. Then it kind of hit me that nope, you're not going to work, you are staying at home and working. And that was just a crazy thought to me that no, legit, we are actually going through something at the moment. And the reason why every day sometimes days can become a blur, and that is because the routine is so monotonous to the point that our brain isn't taking in any new information. And there are studies to show that depending on how much information your brain is taking in on the day will actually determine how much of that day you remember. And if your brain hasn't taken in any new information, then it doesn't need to process the day as much, therefore it will seem as though time passed a lot quicker. So I thought that was really cool, because that explains why every day might seem to drag if you don't really have new things to do. So one cool suggestion I could make is you guys having a wonder day, and so as to learn something new. So once you learn something new, that in effect will make your days not seem as though they're just passing you by, and to that idea of all you know right now is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So that is something that people can practice at home. You can just go online, you can find out little bits there. I'm pretty sure there's websites out there that will give you like I have a really cool app called Curiosity Daily, and what it does is that it sends me just new bits of information every single day. I sometimes check Reddit is a really cool resource for people. It's quite funny, and there's also some really informative threads there. There's one called Today I Learned, and basically people just post what they've learned today, and that is just a wealth of information that you can take on, and you can find out some new information and maybe make your days less of a blur. And I believe that's what everyone's trying to do. Everyone's just trying not to get into this zone of days are just passing by and you're having a somewhat fleeting feeling. People want to at least experience their days, and the reason why you could remember your days a bit more vividly before was because you had so much different stimulus that can make you say, oh yeah, I remember that day because that day I went to the shop and I remember the shopkeeper said there was no more salmon teriyaki at Wasabi's, and that was a very annoying day. So little information and stimulus like that is what your brain will then process, and because that's new information it has to process, therefore it's going to take it longer. It will take your brain longer to process it, and therefore the day won't seem as though it's just blaring by. Your brain will remember it. So with all this talk about time, I think it's time for another short interlude. For all you new listeners out there who may have not caught up with all 10 other episodes of the Mind Wanderers podcast, my next point has close links to my second episode called Gaming the System, in which I looked at how neurotransmitters within your brain affect the way you respond to stuff like social media, and why we somewhat get into somewhat addictive feedback loop with certain social media. And this is due to certain neurotransmitters or chemicals released in your brain that trigger you to have a certain response to certain stimuli. And one of the chemicals that I focused in on was dopamine. And through my research in perception of time, I've come to realize that dopamine actually speeds up our perception of time. Dopamine is actually released because it's not actually the result of an activity, but our body releases it to motivate us to do an activity that will lead to a reward that we like. So if we think of the phrase time flies when you're having fun, and we understand that dopamine is a chemical that is released in order for us to have something that is fun, it would make sense that when we are constantly being hit with dopamine due to a certain task, that we would feel as though time is going quite quickly. So in relation to the last episode of Gaming the System, there was the feedback loop in which we keep going back to social media because it gives us this sense of reward once we actually go on it. So this could possibly explain why we waste a lot of time on social media. It could be down to this dopamine effect. And researchers have also discovered that on the flip side, there are chemicals that do the opposite effect of dopamine, and these inhibit our response and also make us feel as though time is slowing down. And this chemical is I don't even know how to say the word, I'm not even going to lie to you guys, but I believe it's pronounced neurophyphirine. But yes, there are countermeasures or counter chemicals that actually inhibit our sense of time and can make time feel as though it's going a lot slower. I also took a wander and discovered emotions play a big part in how we experience time. This was actually shown through two professors in France back in 2011 who ran a study, and what they did was they showed their students 3 different types of movies, and the movies were meant to bring about different emotions. One of them was meant to bring about fear, one of them was meant to bring about sadness, and one of them was meant to bring about just a neutral sort of feeling. And what they discovered at the end of the study was that the movie that produced the feelings of fear, the students registered as that movie taken a lot longer, and this goes back to that idea of having a primal instinct when you're met with new information and your body's trying to, once it gets into a stage where it's fearful for its own existence, what it does is it slows down time in order for you to react. So the same thing happens when we get the same feelings. And this just goes to show that there are a lot of different factors that play into our personal perception of time. And there's also a reason why we actually feel like this period of isolation is dragging on a lot longer than any of us would have imagined, and also makes it feel like every single day is just being a blur, because going back to the point of lack of new information. So all of this just made for a really good wonder, I felt, and time is definitely something we all have on our hands. And I would encourage anyone to maybe have a quick look into time and just see how you can somewhat make the most of it and learn a new instrument or learn a new skill. I feel like this time is really for people to actually take on something new, take on some new information, and don't make it seem like a just mundane day of yesterday, today and tomorrow. And in fact, take each day as it comes and try to learn something new, or listen to a new episode of the Mind Wanderers podcast, whatever picks your fancy. But yeah, I thought time is a really interesting concept to have a look at and have a wonder about now, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. So remember to send through your AC questions, the questions for how you feel the world will be after coronavirus, AC. And remember, you can send that to the Twitter, Instagram, or the actual mindwandererspod at gmail.com. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. But thank you very much for listening. This is episode 11 of the Mind Wanderers podcast. I'm your host, Timi. Peace.
Somebody